When it comes to PvE type games and game modes, I've always had the attitude of the more the merrier. The problem is we don't tend to get a lot of good ones because a lot of developers seem to feel that PvE is an excuse to cut corners when it comes to either the amount of content on display or the quality of said content. Sometimes both, to be honest. Hence why there arguably isn't a lot of really good PvE structured games, and why almost all of them follow the traditional wave-based formula. But every now and then there comes along one game that tries to break the formula, usually by ham-fistedly shoving in elements of a different formula in its place. And that's where we get to Die After Sunset, a single-player PvE roguelike game. Yes, you heard me right. Of all the different components that make up a PvE horde mode type game, online co-op has generally been the glue that ties everything together at the end of the day. But here in Die After Sunset, you're playing solo from beginning to end. Of course, you can absolutely have a PvE game that isn't co-op, but it'd be like playing an RPG that also happens to be an FPS. Fallout 4 and Wolfenstein Youngblood come to mind, for instance. You can make it work, but it goes against the general expectations of your audience and raises the question of what else is different or absent here. You might notice the art design and general world layout are rather similar in nature to that of Fortnite's own PvE campaign, the Save the World mode. I think the vast majority of people who jumped on the hype train, or rather the battle bus, forget that Fortnite started out as a Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare type co-op game in its earliest days. Here you see that same type of bright, cartoony visual style with an absurdist sense of humor that just oozes that overall family-friendly nature. Here each round lasts about 10 minutes, and the game basically forces you to play a very particular way within that span of time, assuming that you don't want to die at the conclusion of that countdown, if not sooner. Ideally, you'll be spending the entirety of that time going from various side objective to side objective in order to successfully complete them and be rewarded with increases in certain passive attributes, namely being health, armor, damage output, etc. And if you do a especially good job, you might get a new weapon or a cooldown ability that'll help you clear out enemies more efficiently. Over the course of any single match, you'll probably have time for 4 or 5 of these side quests before the main final quest opens up. That, of course, being a world boss that you have to go fight in order to progress in the story campaign and access the next map. Here's one of the game's biggest problems, though. There just isn't a lot of content on display here. To start with, there's absolutely no variety in terms of the optional quests you kind of have to go on every map in order to grind for more attribute points. You have the exact same 4 or 5 different types of side quests, with the game always offering you only 2 or 3 options at a time. For example, stop the enemies before they get away via the teleporter, or stop the enemies from stealing all the treasure on the pirate ship. Or you have these 2 fairly similar, solve this puzzle before time runs out quest types. There might be one more I'm forgetting, but that's your basic lineup of quest options. All of these appear to resurface on the subsequent maps, and while 1 or 2 additional quest types appear in those later maps, those few new additions are still outnumbered by those shamelessly re-imported from the previous map. Don't call yourself a roguelike game suggesting that no 2 playthroughs are exactly the same, when in reality you can and often will play the exact same way every single time. You'll get mostly the same upgrade options when successfully completing a side quest, you'll get mostly the same exact side quest on every single map, you'll start out with literally the same exact loadout, since both of the 2 currently available characters always have their own signature weapon, and while you can't upgrade it, it'll still look the same and mostly shoot the same too. There is just, at the end of the day, an overwhelming sameness to every aspect of the game, and that definitely detracts from the appeal. The lack of additional weapons beyond just a simple primary doesn't do the game any favors either, but what's far more annoying is the NPCs constantly harassing you at every turn. And no, I'm not trying to Me Too the NPCs here, but the game is extremely annoying about constantly spawning in more NPCs on you non-stop every single second you play. In the time you spend shooting one, 3 more will spawn in and start shooting you. And you get absolutely no reward for defending yourself against these guys. There isn't even a rudimentary XP system simply granting you experience points per NPC kill. In your first few matches, you'll probably find yourself dying a fair bit just to normal NPCs across the map, chipping away at your health a bit at a time. Worse, when you actually successfully complete a boss fight and exit the map, you're given 2 options, either to continue or to back out to the main menu. If you choose to go back to the main menu, it counts that as a failure and you're forced to restart from scratch. The game never wants you going back to the main menu, like if you want to go spend the in-game currency you've acquired on getting new skills, etc. That will result in you having to sacrifice your progress, and at no point is this ever communicated to you, the player. This can be extremely frustrating if you just spent half an hour playing through the first 2 levels to completion and want to upgrade before going into the 3rd level. Oh, that's right, the game currently only contains 3 levels. So if you're hoping for a lengthy playthrough, then you're going to be disappointed here. Actually, as of me recording this video, they just added a 4th. This works out to be roughly only an hour of playable content when you include the 10-minute long rounds, which are followed by a brief boss battle at the conclusion of each level. Granted, the bosses themselves are actually somewhat decent, they're all fairly easy to beat, and somewhat generic in design, true. But compared to the busy work I spent most of my time suffering through, the boss fights were definitely the peak moments of the entire game. Except the boss at the end of the 3rd level, fuck that guy, that was an annoying boss fight and I hope never to repeat it. And I don't mean annoying as in it was hard to beat, I just mean annoying as in I never want to beat it again or play the game as a result of playing that boss fight. It's also worth that when navigating this map, especially in regards to its inherent verticality, it's nothing short of a nightmare. I spent a decent amount of in-game currency on unlocking a passive double jump ability, but it simply does not work. Despite unlocking it, I can still only do a single jump, and given the nature of how higher ground works in the game, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be able to access several areas of the map even with a triple jump. You often needlessly waste seconds or minutes at a time just trying to figure out how to get to certain points of interest on elevated ground. If you're on lower ground at the time, it can take you several minutes to find a path far out of your way to eventually lead you to said higher ground. There's just so much unnecessary backtracking involved, which just reeks of poor map design. If you're going to have verticality be a factor and you're going to have a limited timed cooldown for the player to concern themselves with, you've got to either make it far easier to get to higher ground, or alternatively, drastically increase the rewards a player gets for going far out of their way to get to that objective on the higher or lower ground. Ultimately, it's all about balance. Most of the complaints I'm bringing up here can probably be attributed to a lack of fine-tuning and a lack of additional content creation. And I suppose that's what bothers me the most. Not that all of this can't be fixed, but that the need for such extensive fixing was required in the first place. This game feels rushed out to market far too quickly. Early access at its best should be treated like an ongoing beta. Sure, you can always add more content over time, but the base foundation at the heart of the game should be somewhat sound. Early access is all about smoothing out the rough edges and going the extra mile to ensure that when the game exits early access as a complete game, it's not only equal in quality to a game that just went straight to full release, but better than said game because the early access game had the inherent advantage of time and public feedback on its side. Die After Sunset doesn't just feel like it's at a beta stage, it feels like it's in the earliest possible alpha stage. Overall, I don't recommend buying Die After Sunset just yet. Maybe at some point in the future I'll return to the game when it's gotten many more updates and it's launched as a full 1.0 game. But for right now, it's a definite no-go. On that note though, that's where I think I'm going to wrap it up for today. As ever, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the like button, comment below what you think of the game, you know the drill. Comments really help my videos get boosted in the algorithm. And plus, I read and respond to nearly all the comments I get, and I say this in every single video and people still seem surprised when I actually respond to them. Maybe other YouTubers are just simply a dick and they don't like talking to their audience. Believe me, you guys talking to me and me talking to you is the highlight of my day. This is Warrior Dan signing out. Stay awesome everybody, stay safe, and peace out.